Defense News is proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, we go into the VA's effort to get a count of the nation's homeless veterans. And also part one of our story on how the National Guard is training for Arctic warfare with Russia and China. We talk with its leader about what the force is doing to prepare. Finally, get up close and personal with NATO Marines. See how they're training to keep member countries safe. And finally, more on our conversation on Project Overmatch. It's those stories and more in the latest in news and analysis from the Pentagon to the platoon, here on Defense News Weekly. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Andrea Scott. The Department of Veterans Affairs wants to end veteran homelessness in the nation. To help direct its resources where they're needed, the agency regularly conducts what is called a point-in-time count. Military Times met up with Secretary Dennis McDonough in Washington as he took part in the nationwide effort.
Every year, the Department of Veterans Affairs takes a look at how many veterans across the country are experiencing homelessness. Recently, the department has said they're making it even more of a priority to tackle this problem, so the phrase homeless veteran becomes a thing of the past. In order to grab this snapshot of the current housing problem, here in Washington, D.C., a group of Department and D.C. Veterans Affairs medical staff surveyed those experiencing homelessness in the local area in what's called a point-in-time count. This year, they were joined by Department of Veterans Affairs Secretary Dennis McDonough for the event. We had the opportunity to shadow the Secretary as he spoke with people experiencing homelessness, listening to their stories and offering them resources to manage their situation. In short, despite the cold and rainy weather, McDonough joined the group conducting surveys to gauge how many people are unhoused in the city, and therefore how many resources and funds should be allocated for them.
This is maybe the sixth or seventh one of these I've done. Obviously it's raining, so many homeless people go into shelter tonight, which is a good thing. So we may not be seeing just as much homelessness as we would normally expect. Look, this is the one way that we can get a snapshot of what the homelessness picture is in the country. And it's really important for us to know it because that provides us the target that we build towards to defeat homelessness. And so it's really important for us to come out to make sure that we're counting exactly what we see so that we know what we're up against. And look, there's questions about the methodology. I know that people challenge it. I think that's fair, but it's also really important for us to be out here. Two of the individuals that we met tonight were impacted, were moved by the fact that we were out here trying to find out what they're going through. So there's a very simple human dimension to it as well. So tonight what we're really doing is trying to get a snapshot of the experience of those individual vets. We ask them a series of questions, we record the answers to those questions, then we give them a small token, a $20 gift card for them going through that exercise. But then we also give them a full sheet of information that allows them to know what's available to them, as well as giving them dry gloves, dry socks, a cap, some toiletries, some hygiene items. So it ends up being, I think, a very, very useful interaction. You know, as I said, this is like the sixth or seventh one of these I've done, and we get better at it every year. But you know what? I think we all hope that we're getting out of this business. I hope that we don't have to do this anymore because we've beaten the homelessness challenge. I feel like we're making really good strides at VA. And we're going to stay on top of this until we don't have to do it anymore, until we get to zero homeless vets. You know, look, the president is demanding action on homelessness across the country, across the phenomenon. He's said to us very directly, he does not accept that there should be any homeless veterans. So we set out for calendar year 2022 to permanently house 38,000 veterans in communities all across the country. We actually exceeded that goal by 2,000. In fact, a little more than 2,000, about 4,100 or so formerly homeless vets are now in permanent housing as a result of the great work of the people that you see out here with us tonight. These great caseworkers, these great outreach coordinators among our VA staff. I'm super proud of them, and I'm really glad to know that there's 40,000 vets tonight under a roof getting the substance use disorder care, the mental health care, the counseling, the job training that they need to not be homeless again. I continue to believe that the phrase homeless veteran ought not exist in the English language. Anybody in this country who raises their right hand to swear the oath to defend all of us should not be homeless in this amazing country. So we are going to work tirelessly until we are at zero homeless vets. That means preventing vets and their families who might be in a precarious time. And it also means helping identify vets out on the streets like we're doing tonight and getting them into housing first and then getting the care they need.
According to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's report on homelessness, nearly 600,000 people were experiencing homelessness last year. The data that the group collected from this most recent pit count will be made available in the months to come. For Military Times, I'm Jonathan Lehrfeld.
Artificial intelligence and machine learning are big topics for the Navy as it tries to envision future fights with other global powers. As part of our regular webcast series, we spoke with two experts on the topic about how the technology is likely to evolve.
I wonder, what you both make of decision advantage today against potential adversaries such as Russia, China, others out there in the world, and what would decision advantage really have to look like in the future as the battlefield becomes more complex?
Sure, I think that's a great question. I would say, everyone's thinking about this. China recently announced their own JADC2 competitor. Its decision advantage is sort of one of these really eminent issues across the board for everyone. I think at the present moment, if I were pressed, I would say we definitely have a kind of decision advantage at the moment, but it all depends on context. Russia and China both have very hierarchical decision-making structures and comparatively less intelligence to work with. We're seeing that laid bare for Russia right now in Ukraine. And there's evidence to suggest that China has similar issues, particularly in the difficulty of their different wings of their armed forces to collaborate and communicate due to that hierarchical structure. But the fact is, both China and Russia recognize the decision advantage we currently have and what we're trying to build. So both of them have sort of specific military documents that really call this out and aim to engage, would only aim to engage American forces where they can minimize or diminish our decision advantage. That would be limited, localized conflicts. I think a decision advantage that we should be aiming for is one that's resilient, one that's able to take those attacks that they're trying to build out for systems like Project Overmatch and is able to kind of maintain decision advantage when elements of our systems may be compromised.
Certainly. And Brian, how about you?
Yeah, Megan, to build on that, I think those are great points. So if you think of decision advantage as being able to make faster and better decisions than your opponent, then there's some things that sort of fall out of that in terms of, well, technologically, what do I need? Operationally, what do I need? one way of looking at that is, if I can make decisions at a scale and a tempo that sort of overwhelms my opponent, well, then I can certainly, maybe constrain his options and start to drive him into a position where he has to seek an off ramp. And a way to do that is to have connectivity with more of the force, have a larger number of potential units you can draw upon. It's not every sensor, every shooter, but it's being able to communicate with more of the force, and then have a more disaggregated force. So you've got more tools to play with and recompose in new ways.
Welcome back. For the past 2 decades, the United States has been fighting mainly on dry land in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. That may not be the case in the future battlefield, though, that could take place in sub-zero conditions. As the Pentagon looks toward wars with potential adversaries such as China and Russia, it plans to build the force's Arctic warfare capabilities. The National Guard trained for Arctic warfare here in the lower 48. Military Times traveled with the Guard's leader to northern Michigan to observe the service's training.
And what we have to do is get through the, we talk about surviving in the Arctic, and this is not quite the Arctic, but it's kind of close. But the point is we can't just survive. We've got to be able to thrive and operate. And so the more we can practice this environment, the better we're going to be if we get called to do that. So hopefully we learn all the hard lessons here, or most of them. We share them with everybody so that when they get into this environment, or if they get called into this environment, they're hopefully at a more of a jog and not at a walk.
Well, General Hokanson, thanks so much for sitting down with us. I wanted to ask, first of all, about what you saw today, what looked good, what some of the feedback was that you got, and also what some of the recommendations you bring up to the Joint Staff about what you saw today.
What we saw today is our guardsmen realizing that, the Arctic is an important environment, and we need to take every opportunity to really train environments we may not be exposed to all the time, just to remember we can operate in that, and then also to reacquaint ourselves with things that we have learned in the past, or in some cases we have to relearn. So if you look at the M777 artillery that they had today, I was talking to the crews about what they've learned in that environment, the cold, and frankly how our soldiers operate. And this is the 4th year for that unit. They continue to get better at what they're doing. And he said if the temperature is much colder, they found other things. And this year it was certainly cold, but not as cold as it had been previously.
What does the next step look like from something like this to a larger exercise farther north, or with a bigger unit, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so if you go back 3 years ago when I was the director of the Army Guard, we realigned the Guard divisions. Previously, our division headquarters and brigades were separate organizations. So we aligned them for training, really for large-scale combat operations. And the unit we saw today was a great example. They first came with a company. Next year, they came with a company and a detachment. The second year, they came with 2 companies. This year, they came with the entire battalion. And so what we're trying to do is build beyond platoon and company level readiness to where we build eventually, years from now, to where we are doing division level exercises. When I was a brigade commander, I spent a lot of time with our artillery battery because it was so much fun. Great organization, they love to shoot, and get to do some awesome stuff.
And is a camp like that work? Does a National Guard training center like that work for that, or is that something you would go to one of the joint national training centers? So
we look at Camp Grayling. It is in a huge training area. In fact, that is an area where you could actually operate a division at. Some of our training are just not that large. But then again, we have to build in those local training areas the individual, the crew, the platoon, and the company level readiness to get to where you saw the team today. You always see a map of the United States and we're in the center and it kind of has a globe around it. If you look at a map from the North Pole, you see how close all these countries are, and you also see the vastness of the Arctic. And as we look at the temperatures increasing and further access to the Arctic, some of these areas that we almost thought, well, nobody would operate in there because they're so difficult. Now we're starting to see countries move into those areas, and there will be competition there. And you see China, you see Russia, and then you see some of our NATO allies like Norway that operate there. And we've got to be able to go wherever that potential fight may be. Or if we need to provide presence there, we need to be able to go there and not just go there and survive, but go there, operate, and thrive.
So yeah, there's a lot of good training here. Yeah. We integrate with the air. Right. So it really helps our fires. We get multiple. On the joint side.
You also talked to and learned a little bit about the Latvians who are at Camp Grayling right now. What is the future of that partnership look like? Yeah. And what does it look like with other Baltic countries or European countries, Eastern European countries?
So I was fortunate last year in June, I actually visited all the Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. And obviously, there's an immediate presence there because they border Russia, both Estonia and Latvia, and then Lithuania through Kaliningrad. And so they live this day to day. They've lived this for generations. And in many cases, the threat is more present to them. And you see the urgency and their support for Ukraine, but then also the focus on, hey, we need to be prepared if something happens along our border. And it's, in a way, a sense of urgency. And then also for us, we've gone back since the war in Ukraine started and met with our Baltic state partners and said, look, based on the current environment, would you like to change your training plans? And we've made some adaptations in that case.
Up next, our personal finance expert provides insight on how federal interest rates can impact the housing market. Welcome back. On this edition of Money Minute, Navy Federal Credit Union personal finance expert Jeanette Mack shows you how interest rates affect the housing market.
The two most common types of mortgages are fixed and adjustable rates. Choosing the one that's right for you comes down to the mortgage rate environment and what you can safely afford now and in the future. With rates on the rise, you have to weigh your options carefully. A fixed rate gives you stability of payments, while an adjustable rate gives you more affordability up front. Either way, interest rates will determine how much you qualify for and, more importantly, how much house you can afford. If you're buying a home soon, it's wise to seek the help of a qualified realtor and a trusted lender to guide you in a changing market. Then it's time to get creditworthy. Make sure your credit score and report are in good shape. Also, bulk up your down payment and emergency fund accounts. Having cash reserves gives you credibility as a buyer. And above all, set a budget for yourself. You should be confident you can make those mortgage payments comfortably and on time every month. Ultimately, your peace of mind is worth more than stretching your budget too far to get into a new home. Bottom line, make sure the time and the price is right.
Thanks, Jeanette. We'll see you next time. To get more coverage of military and defense topics, navigate over to Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps Times.com and DefenseNews.com. And to be the smartest ranger in the unit when it comes to news, sign up for our Early Bird Brief for stories delivered to your inbox each weekday. It's also in audio. Check out the podcast version out now. And if social media is where you get your headlines, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. When we come back, we train with Marines who are keeping NATO member countries safe. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. When you think of Marines, you may think of amphibious battles of the past, such as Normandy. But Marines also play a vital role today for NATO. Here's a look at how the forces train together to keep allies safe.
They are perhaps one of any Navy's most renowned assets.
As amphibious troops, we bridge that gap from the sea to the land.
They are mobile, amphibious, and highly trained.
It is a fighting force that is able to land in places where other conventional warfare cannot be handled.
They are known under various pseudonyms: Devil Dogs, bootnecks, black devils, fujos and many more.
É importante confiar uns nos outros. Só a confiança nos traz o sucesso para a missão.
They are deployable by sea and by air and able to operate on different terrains under all weather conditions.
We worden van de woestijn tot in de bergen kunnen wij ingezet worden en overal waar mensen zijn kunnen zich conflicten ontwikkelen.
They are the Marines. The unforgiving fjords and mountains of Norway, where temperatures reach minus 35 degrees Celsius, is for many a landscape to be feared and avoided. But for the UK's Royal Marine Commandos, it presents an ideal training ground.
The Royal Marines are Arctic specialists, so we're out here every winter honing these skills, and there's a huge coastline up in Norway, so being able to operate from the boats adds so much to what we can do on the land. The Royal Marines started as the infantry of the Navy and then developed quite a lot through World War II, taking on that commando aspect, and that's the legacy of the Royal Marines.
Norway and the United Kingdom are now close NATO allies. And for this group of commandos, the freezing conditions on the Norwegian coastline presents a challenging opportunity to conduct drills in their orks, or offshore raiding craft. Some 1,700 kilometres away from the icy conditions in the Norwegian Arctic, the rugged cliffs and intricate bays of the Scottish coast present a different challenge altogether. For these Dutch Marines, training here enables them to practice tactical insertions and extractions in different conditions than they might find back home.
Ons motto, qua patet orbis, zo wijd de wereld strekt. Overal ter wereld moeten wij ingezet kunnen worden onder wat voor omstandigheden, terrein of weer dan ook.
First they're inserted via helicopter. Then they must make their way through the Scottish marshland to a beach extraction point.
Met iedere operatie die je voert zijn er altijd gevaren die om de hoek kunnen kijken. Simpele gevaren zoals een veranderende sea state die ervoor zorgt dat het debarkeren van een kleine landingsvaartuig het bemoeilijk maakt. Daarnaast, je gaat simpelweg een vijandelijk gebied in vanuit een bootje. De vijand kan je van ver af aan zien komen. Dat kan je zeer kwetsbaar maken.
In a separate amphibious insertion, they're working alongside Marines from Germany.
Wij zullen zelf als kleine korps binnen Nederland niet tot alle mogelijkheden kunnen beschikken wanneer wij willen oefenen. Maar op het moment dat wij kunnen samenwerken met de Amerikanen, met de Duitsers die meer of andere voertuigen dan wij gebruiken, kunnen wij alleen maar eigenlijk onze bereikheid in de wereld vergroten. Dus ik denk dat dat zeker wel een belangrijk aspect is om samen te werken in de NAVO.
Training exercises like this one allow Marines from different NATO nations to work together, learning each other's techniques and practices. The biggest contributor to NATO's marine capability, with almost 180,000 active personnel, is the United States Marine Corps.
The Allied Marine community, we share a common heritage and history as soldiers of the sea. We're accustomed to having to be ready to pick up and move to a crisis area at a moment's notice in order to meet and accomplish the mission. We've been here since 1980, so there's a legacy and history of cooperation with our allies in the area.
And in a traditionally male-dominated branch of the military, the United States, in 2016, opened up combat roles in the Marine Corps to women. It takes a special type of person to become a Marine, a spirit of togetherness and camaraderie.
Je bent toch onderdeel van een kleine selecte groep binnen Defensie die zich op hele mooie plekken in de wereld in kan laten zetten.
I am part of something that's bigger than myself, and I take pride in the fact that I'm doing something that so few other individuals choose to do.
Our protection is their defining purpose. They are the Marines of NATO.
And that's all we have time for this week. Please visit us on militarytimes.com and defensenews.com for more coverage. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.